Welcome to episode 24 of the Yes You Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Manning, and today I'm going to be doing more of a personal episode. So, this episode, I'm going to be sharing about how I use confidence work, the situations I'm in where I need to be confident, and the times when I'm not, and how I handle that. I think sometimes people act surprised when they find out that I was worried about something or I was nervous about something. They're like, "Oh, do you feel like that? Do you get like that?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course. Like, I'm not a psychopath. I'm just a normal human." Uh, yeah. Do I feel confident in every scenario? No, of course I don't. I'm not. I haven't done everything a million times. I don't have endless abilities at everything. I'm not immune from the worries and nerves and stresses that come along with life because I'm a coach or because I'm a confidence coach. And I face them in different ways, just like we all do. It just so happens that because I am a confidence coach, um, I think I've got a lot of capacity when it comes to doing things that are a bit scary. And I have a lot of things that I'm practiced in that make it a bit easier for me. And some of that stuff is the stuff that I work on with clients. So I thought about some different examples for you that I wanted to share. And the first one that I want to talk about is starting my own business. So previously I qualified and trained to be a solicitor. I didn't always, wasn't always a coach. And I'd worked in a law firm, and then I'd worked in the NHS, and then I'd moved into doing policy and strategy work within the NHS. So I've had quite a few changes, like quite a few job changes, and quite a few times where my changes in job have been out of my comfort zone, and I haven't always felt that confident. But I think going from paid employment to running and managing my own business full time potentially could have been a scary one, right? And it was a big thing for me to think about. So I was thinking about it, I guess, I mean, I qualified in 2018 as a coach. And at that point, I wouldn't even dare admit that it was what I wanted to do, like as a career and full time, because I was like, oh, I just don't know if I'm one of those kinds of people, which is funny when you think about it, right? Who is one of those kinds of people? That was just a thing that my head was coming up with and I was believing. But in April 2022, I went full time in the business. I'd been running for a little while before then, and it was probably a big leap, right? And when I was telling people, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do. This is my plan," people kept looking at me and being like, "Wow, you're brave." And every time someone did that, I was like, "Shit, I wish people would stop saying that," because it like made me more scared. And before after I'd handed my notice in and I knew that, this is what I was going to do. I've handed my notice in, I'm going to be running the business full time. I was having dinner with my parents. It was just me and my parents. They were sat on one side of the table and I was sat on the other. And I said, guys, I've handed my notice in. I'm going to be running the business full time from April. And my dad did a little fist pump and said, "You go, girl." And my mom put her head in her hands and said, "Oh dear, what about your pension?" And I was like, "You two are hilarious." I was like, "You're like the two different sides of my brain." One side of my brain is like, "You go, girl." And the other side is like, "Oh no, what about your pension?" And the reason that I wanted to share that little story with you is because my brain was going in both directions at that time. But because I know how my brain works, because I know that my brain is designed to look out for any risk and danger and warn me about it, as well as push me forward and get excited about the future and change things, I was well prepared for that. So I knew that along that journey, my brain was going to be coming up with stuff. I knew it was going to be panicking about some things. I had a little period where I would wake up in the night and it was like my brain was trying to be Excel. It would be like calculating spreadsheets, like figures. Basically, my brain just really trying to work out if I was going to be able to pay my bills, pay my mortgage. Right. I have an apartment. I am single, so I am paying for my own life. I'm the one paying all the bills. And I, that is what my brain was engaged in doing at that time. Now, I guess probably the difference between me then and me years before was I knew this is what my brain was going to be up to in this period. I knew that my brain, designed to keep me safe, would be worrying about paying the bills, and it would be worrying about, is this going to work? Are people going to resonate with the stuff that you're doing? Does anyone care? Like, will you have any clients? I knew my brain was going to be doing all that. Now, that didn't mean that that was easy or nice to deal with, but what it meant was when my brain was going down that track, I got it. I was like, yeah, I didn't make that mean, oh dear, my brain's right and I should stop doing what I'm doing. I was like, oh yeah, that's my brain's gonna go in that direction. So it was kind of okay for my brain to do that. Just like it was okay for my mum to put her head in her hands and say, oh dear, what about your pension? I was like, yeah, my brain's coming up with that too, mom. But I didn't allow that to stop me. And I didn't really have a lot of drama about it because I was like, well, that's just my brain doing its thing. It wants to keep me safe. It wants to um, make sure that I can pay the bills. Now, there were moments where that was a bit scary, but I was like, I also had other things that I knew which helped me during that time. So, one of the things that I knew was that even if this all goes wrong, even if the business was a complete flop, which so far has been pretty successful, but even if it was a complete flop, I knew that I would back myself and that I would never subject myself to like abuse inside my own head for making that decision to go into my own business. So the worst thing that could really happen was the business just didn't really work and I would go and get a new job. But the scariest thing usually isn't even that when we're embarking on something new. It's that we know that we're going to be so critical of ourselves that it's going to leave us in like a complete heap and our confidence will be in absolute tatters. But I knew, because I'm a coach, that I could just make a decision ahead of time that I was never going to do that to myself. I was never, ever going to say to myself, you shouldn't have made this decision. You were wrong. What an idiot. I said to myself, I promise you, I will never do that to you. I am always going to be proud that you gave it a go. And when you have that kind of relationship with yourself, it's easier to be braver because I know that I'm not going to beat myself up. It's like, imagine you have a partner and you know that whatever happens, they're going to support you. They're never going to say to you, you're such an idiot. Why did you do that? They'll be like, you know what? I'm proud of you. You gave it your best shot. You did everything you possibly could. That's supportive. And that kind of relationship creates confidence with another person. Well, guess what? That kind of relationship also creates confidence within yourself. So, buoyed by knowing that even if it went wrong, I'm never gonna badmouth myself. I'm never gonna, you know, say, oh, what a shit person you are. You couldn't make this work. You should never have done this, blah, blah, blah. I know that I'm never going to do that. So it makes me a bit braver. I can take it on knowing that the worst thing that's going to happen is I will feel bad and that's okay. And I can get another job, but I will not beat myself up in the process. And the other thing that I do, because I'm practiced at this stuff, is I remind myself why I want to do this thing. So when your brain is afraid, when my brain was afraid, it's going to come out with reasons like, oh, like, why would you do this? Like, you leave a secure job, blah, 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 blah. And I would remind my brain why I wanted to do this on purpose. I'd be like, look, I've always wanted to do something different with my life. Now I've got the opportunity. I've always wanted to have my own business, even though I never admitted it. And now I've got the opportunity. I am really passionate about the work that I do, supporting women at work with confidence. I that I think the world needs it. So I remind myself of that. And that is also really helpful and really boosting to my confidence. And I think the last thing around the business is I'm like willing to do things afraid. I'm willing to do things afraid. And that's probably partly because of what I said earlier about not beating myself up and knowing that I'll keep a good opinion of myself no matter what happens. But I also just think that that's part of life is just being afraid and trying to do things anyway. I think I've always had a bit of a what's the word, like a tendency to just say yes and then figure out the details later. Because I find that once you've said yes and committed, I will just find a way to figure it out. And you're probably the same. Once you've said yes and you've said you'll do something, even if you don't feel confident, you feel really nervous or whatever, you will figure it out. You know that. So if you know you can trust yourself to figure it out, you might feel a bit crappy in the meantime, but I think that gives you a lot of confidence. So that is the stuff around the business. And I'm glad that I did it. It's going well and I'm enjoying it. And who knows how it'll end up. But yeah, 2023. What will 2023 bring? World domination, hopefully, and hundreds of confident women doing their thing everywhere. The next area that I wanted to share about was confident decision making. I think decision making is one of those areas where it can be easy to doubt yourself, to second guess, to think that other people know the answers more than you. And that happens in a work context for people. And I also think that it happens in a personal context. And I've had like some big decisions to make in the last few years. And there's one in particular that I want to talk about. But first, I want to just share this little story that I often share with people. And I asked this lady if I could share this, and she said, yeah. She said, yeah, if it's going to help somebody else, you can. Because I was talking to someone who's a potential new client. And she was facing a change of career. She wanted to make a change in terms of her career. She had a clinical scientist and health background. And she said, I am completely unable to make this decision. I am completely frozen. I don't know what the right decision is. And as we started talking about it and as we dug into it, she told me that every single decision she'd made in the past had been wrong. So she had to get this one right. And I thought, God bloody hell, no pressure. And it was clear to me that she was putting, because she was saying, I've made all the decisions wrong in the past, she didn't have any confidence in herself to make a decision and to stick with it and for it to be right. And I was like, ooh. And that sent me off thinking about the decisions I made or didn't make. And I really started thinking about it and being conscious of it. And I listened to this podcast where, if you've never listened to this podcast, you might like it. If you like coaching stuff, it's called the Life Coach School podcast. And the woman who's the host of that, who owns the business, is called Brooke Castillo. And she shared this concept where, when I was thinking about decision making, which was completely revolutionary to me, which was that a decision can be like a two-part thing. This is not quite how she described it, but this is how I remember it. Decision is like a two-part thing where the first part is that you make the decision. And then the second part is you get to decide whether or not that is the right decision. Now, that might seem like a strange concept, but it became a very important concept for me when I was making the decision about whether or not I wanted to stay married or whether or not I wanted to separate from my then husband of 10 years. And it's my then husband of 10 years because not my husband anymore. I made the decision to end a marriage, and that was a decision that I didn't take lightly. And as you can imagine, I agonized over. And this concept of making the decision and then making another decision that you've made the right decision was, let me tell you, a lifesaver. And it helped me to be so much more confident in my decision, because I was like, I can make the decision to end this marriage. And then I can make the decision that it was the right decision. And that was something that, even when my brain was saying, oh no, this is terrible, blah, 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 it was like I didn't waver, because I'd already made the decision that it was the right decision. And what this lady Brooke shared was that there really is no such thing as a right and a wrong decision. When we're making decisions, we don't feel confident because we're trying to select the right answer. But it's not like we're trying to select the right answer to a maths question, is it? There really isn't a right answer for whether or not I should leave a marriage. There's only the answer that I choose. And I can choose that that answer is the right answer. That idea and that concept made me confident in my decision making at a time where it was difficult to be confident in my decision making, and I could easily have doubted myself. And you can do it too. You can make a decision and then just make a decision that your decision is right. So many people, after I made that decision, maybe they'd see me months later or a year later or whatever, or they'd see me with a new partner and they will be like, oh, that's good that you've got a new partner. It must mean that you made the right decision. And I was like, these people must be walking around just leaving whether or not they made the right decision to some circumstance that happens afterwards. I was not going to leave that to chance. If I'm going to be confident in my decision, I'm going to make the decision that's the right decision, and I'm going to stick with it. So if you've got areas where you're kind of, oh, am I making the right decision? And it isn't actually a maths problem. There is no such thing as a right decision. There's just the decision that you make. And if you want to, you can just make the decision that you made the right decision. I know that's a bit of a tongue twister, but I hope I explained that correctly. And that has made me loads more confident in my decision making. Also knowing that I don't outsource those kinds of decisions. I insource them now. I think about and I find out what it is I actually want, and then I go with that. I don't try and make the decision based on what my parents would think or my friends would think or what I think is socially acceptable or any of those things, because I'm like, that just leads me to turmoil and heartache. The next one I want to share with you is, again, a work-based one. And I recently did a keynote speech, and I think there was like 150 people. It was in person, and I was nervous. And I think I don't really get that nervous anymore when I do these kinds of speakings online. But I think probably because since before COVID, I've not done as much in-person stuff for quite a while. So leading up to it and the night before and the morning of, I felt nervous. I felt really nervous. Even though I knew I'd done loads of prep, I knew it would be a nice audience, I knew my stuff. My brain was still having a bit of a problem with it, and my body felt nervous. And again, because I am a confidence coach and I know about how the brain and the body work in these situations, I didn't make that mean that anything had gone terribly wrong or that I wasn't supposed to be doing it or any of those things. I was like, well, this is how the brain and the body reacts when it sees a threat and it thinks that the situation's potentially dangerous or risky. So that's all right. I am nervous, and you'll have situations like this. If you perceive a situation to be a bit, dangerous or risky, you are going to feel that response in your body. You're going to feel that adrenaline. You're going to feel that fight or flight response. And when I feel like that, I know that some of the nicest things to do for myself are physical touch is important to me. And now I was on my own, so I'll make sure that I stroke my arm or I just hold my hand on my chest. I find it very soothing to have physical touch in those situations. I also like to have a warm drink. I also like to move around a bit. So I might like jump about, do some star jumps, take a hot shower, take a nice bath. All of those things I know that I can do to comfort me, and make me feel, and just comfort me while I'm feeling nervous. I'm like, it's okay that I'm feeling nervous, and here's how I'm going to comfort myself. And another thing that I kind of had to do was, my brain is usually like, it's not too noisy usually around things that I do, but if there's something that's out of my comfort zone or that I haven't done for a while, I know that my brain, just like anyone's brain, is going to come up with like some fear stuff. So in relation to that, my brain was like, oh God, what if no one likes it and they think it's crap, and you're just going to do this thing crap in front of 150 people? And I was like, okay, all right. I was like, I see you, I hear your concerns. I don't think that that's going to be the case. You've never done anything that crap before, and you know what you're doing. You've prepped it all, like you're ready. So instead of just going along with my brain in that moment and listening to and believing all its nervous ramblings, I was like, okay, here's the other side of that story, etc., etc. But I can also kind of get on with what I'm doing, knowing that, yeah, my brain's going to be doing that a bit today because I am nervous, and that's okay. So I don't get into the sort of slide. I don't get into the spiral of, oh no, what if this, and then my business is going to fail, and then no one's ever going to hire me again, and all that. I never got as far as that, which is like, it's a common thing that once our brain starts on that kind of fear track, that we get into like a spiral or a slide. People often will describe it like that to me. But I know that part of this confidence work is that I will feel nervous and I will feel fear. And at that point, my brain is going to want to go on like a little slide, a little spiral of thinking, which is not going to be useful or helpful or end well. So I'm very firm with it in that moment to be like, no, no, I know you're afraid. I know you're nervous, but you will stop right there. You are not going any further on that little train. And do you know what? Surprisingly, my brain is um what's the word? Like compliant, which is great. So the keynote speech went really well, by the way. But that was a recent example of when I had to do that work on myself. And I had to kind of use all the techniques that I know in order to support myself in a moment. Another area, and this is one where, so in that keynote example, I was really able to kind of manage my mind and to kind of ride with the nerves and like allow them and all of that. But there will be times when you have to do what you're doing and you are completely overwhelmed. You aren't able to just do whatever it is you're trying to do. You're completely overwhelmed and you sort of go offline. And I wanted to give you an example of a recent kind of time where that did happen to me and how I dealt with it. So I was doing some pitching. It was sort of cold pitching and sort of no, actually no, it wasn't cold pitching because it was through some contacts that I had to businesses to talk about the kind of work that I'm doing and all the rest of it. Now, I knew that I'd been putting it off for ages. I was kind of procrastinating. And I thought, do you know what? I can do this. I need to do this. And I'm procrastinating on it. So I know that when I'm procrastinating because I'm probably afraid of something. So I give myself a little talking to in that moment. And I'm like, I use the arse method. And if you're not sure about that, there is a podcast episode called Using Your Arse to Coach Yourself. Go and listen to it. It's really helpful. So I have this self-coaching method that I can use really, really quickly, where I say to myself, okay, like, why is it that I'm doing this? Why is it important? How do I feel? So I acknowledge how I'm feeling. That's the A. I remind myself of why I want to do this. That's the R. And then I give myself support and encouragement. That's the S and the E. So I quickly went through that process, and that actually got me back online, and it enabled me to just do the pitching that I was going to be doing. I was sending stuff by email anyway. So I send stuff out into the ether. After like quick coaching myself with the arse method, which I definitely would recommend if you're procrastinating, I was able to send the stuff off that I needed to send off. But afterwards, I felt so terrible. I think I literally went cold. I felt awful. I was like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassing. Like, people are going to think I'm such an idiot. I had these horrible, like, thoughts, and I just felt dreadful. And I was like, okay, this is that moment where I just feel completely overwhelmed. And rather than battle with myself and argue with it, I'm like, okay, this is not the moment to try and force myself to do anything. This is not the moment to power through. When I'm completely overwhelmed like that, now I'll just take care of myself. So I laid on the sofa. I got a blanket wrapped really tight around me because I find that really comforting. I was on my own, so I didn't have anyone to give me a cuddle. And I slept for about an hour and a half. And then when I woke up, some of that overwhelm had kind of gone from my body. I didn't feel amazing, but I felt okay. I felt okay. And I was like, okay, that was a really nice way to take care of myself when I was feeling overwhelmed, was to just do what I needed to do to kind of re-regulate myself and get back online. Not force myself through, not power through, but literally just have a timeout and put myself under a blanket and fall asleep. I would definitely recommend it if you're able to do it. But then I took that one step further and I said, right, in the past, I would have like hidden that in shame and embarrassment and just been like, oh my God, it's so embarrassing. And like, I would have sort of had that somewhere inside. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore. One of the things that I help people to do is to bring this stuff out from the inside and to say it in front of somebody else. And it's so cathartic to be able to share this stuff with somebody. This stuff, like, it thrives in silence and like inside. And I'm like, no, that's not how I operate anymore. I'm going to share this. So I texted my coaching group and I was like, guys, I did some pictures today and I just felt so awful. I felt so embarrassed and hideous that I just had to go under my blanket and stay there for like an hour and a half. Do you know, I'm feeling emotional now, even thinking about it. And my coach was like, good for you. You did what you needed to do. And I was like, wow, thanks. And there it was out in the open. And now I'm telling you, even on a podcast, like I never would have done that before. But I feel okay about it. And then I had to do some pitching again recently. And do you know what? I still didn't feel that great about it, but I did it. And I had a cup of tea afterwards. But I definitely didn't need to go and sleep under a blanket. So for those moments when things are just, you push yourself to do something, but it is overwhelming, I just take care of myself and let myself do what I need to do as much as I possibly can. And then I share it. And that really helps. So I hope that you found that useful or interesting or something. And there's maybe something that you can take away from that. The confidence conundrums of a confidence coach. I used to have a coach years ago who always said to me, Anna, new levels, new devils. And I always think of that. Like when you're on a new computer game level, there's always some new, like, bad guy or bad gal or whatever it is. There's always some new like thing that you have to encounter. And it's the same with our lives. Like we might get to a place where we're really confident where we are now, but then we're on to the next thing. And the next level has a next devil. So this confidence work, I think, is ongoing. And especially if you're somebody like me, and you probably are if you're listening to this, who cares about your own development and you're always moving on and trying new things and wanting to grow and all of that, there are always going to be new levels. So there are always going to be new devils, and they bring different challenges in terms of our confidence, and they always will. And I think that's okay. I don't think this is a place where we get to and then it's over. So last thing, if you want to grow your confidence with me in 2023, I'm teaching a free class in Jan. There are 2 opportunities to join the class, on the 4th and on the 26th. I'll drop a link in the show notes. Choose your date, come to the class and share it with anyone else who you might think needs a confidence boost to start 2023. So we're going to be really looking at the areas that you need to develop and the things that you can do to support your confidence throughout the year. It's going to be a great class. all welcome, and I will see you there. Bye.